like to acknowledge the funding agencies behind this work, which are the NSF and also the Data Transparency Lab. And the reason for this work is that whenever you install, I mean, it's well known that mobile applications can cause privacy leaks, right? The problem is, how do you know which third-party organizations or even the application developers are collecting any personal data about you? Most users, when they install an application, they grant the permissions and they think that this is actually going only to the application developer. But the truth is that, as in the web, a lot of third-party advertising and tracking services are also present on mobile applications. And there is no transparency about that. In fact, if we take a look at what kind of information those third-party tracking services can access, they can inherit the same permissions that the user actually grants to the application. So by taking pieces from different applications, they can actually create a very accurate profile of the user. The problem is that if you want to analyze this ecosystem, you cannot rely on existing data sets and tools because, for instance, Ghostery, Upload Plus, or even Privacy Badger, they are very web-specific. They don't have the ability to analyze actually what's happening on mobile applications. So that has actually motivated us to implement the Lumen Privacy Monitor and also to conduct this study because there is a quite a huge opacity in the whole ecosystem. You don't really know which one are those third-party tracking services. And the research questions that we wanted to answer is basically, we wanted to illuminate somehow this mobile ecosystem, but we don't want to focus only on what kind of personal information they are collecting. We want to know as well who they are, why to do it, and also how. So why do we care? Well, if you take a look at this screenshot, you can see a company called Big Data Exchange. And here you can basically buy for $1 in the order of 1 million connections. And you can see here that basically you can have access to a lot of users from AccuWeather, or weather.com, sorry. So this information has to emanate somehow from the mobile applications or from the web services. So as I said, we are using the Lumen Privacy Monitor to have access to that kind of activity. And for that, we implemented a tool that runs entirely on user space. So it means that the users don't have to root the devices. And that way, we can actually increase the scale of the users that are running this application, and therefore the scale of applications and domains that we can analyze. And the Lumen Privacy Monitor has been available for free on Google Play since October 2015, even before we got funding to analyze the whole ecosystem. The results that I will present here are basically going to be presented at the NDSS symposium next February. And you can already find the preprint of the paper available on the project website, which is haystack.mobi. But I will highlight some of the results that we have actually found on this paper. The first thing is that we implemented a method to automatically analyze all the domains that all those applications that we have analyzed are talking to. And we have found in the order of 2,000 domains that are associated with advertising and tracking services. Interestingly, we also developed a method to identify which one is the parent company. So, for instance, in the case of Google, they have different services like Crashlytics for back reporting, or they also have APIs for YouTube, and so on. So we wanted to basically identify who is the parent company behind those third-party tracking services because we wanted to analyze what's the market that they can actually access. So we can see that if we take a look at the top 10 advertising and tracking services, they are present in the order of 80% of the applications that we have analyzed. And surprisingly to us, we have identified that 40% of those domains that they are using are actually hosted in the US. Another interesting aspect that we wanted to analyze is whether those services have the ability to track users across platforms. Yesterday, we heard from Justin the importance of understanding, for instance, the ability to correlate information from users in different platforms. And for that, we basically analyzed the top 1,000 Alexa sites, and we found that the domains that we have identified as trackers are actually present in 40% of the top 1,000 Alexa sites. So I will skip a bit what we are doing with Lumen. You can go to Google Play. We are basically trying to create a very user-friendly interface in which users can actually understand which third-party tracking services are present in the apps, and also what kind of personal information they are collecting. And we had a very clear set of design goals when we implemented the tool. We wanted to, for instance, be able to capture real user stimuli and real network activity. And this is important because if you want to analyze, for instance, IoT environments, you really need to have the smart TV available because the application will interact with this home device. And in addition to that, anecdotally, you can find, for instance, some airlines that provide some in-flight Wi-Fi. And as soon as you have the application installed, and they find the Wi-Fi access point, they start collecting data to the Wi-Fi access point. So if you are actually analyzing this in the lab using static or dynamic analysis, you will miss all that kind of interactions. And we invested a lot of time trying to basically eliminate any side effect. We didn't want to interfere with the normal behavior of the applications. And for that, for instance, we also enable TLS interception, and that actually took us in the order of a year to actually make it bulletproof and efficient without actually disrupting the applications. But also, we wanted to collect data for research, and we wanted to do it in an ethical way. So we didn't collect, we're not collecting any personal information. We're also asking users to give us consent. And we follow the recommendations that you can find on the manual report, in which basically you can have a set of guidelines that you should follow in order to make an ethical research. So we are not collecting any personal data. What we are collecting is application X talk to food.com, they leak the IMEI, but we're not getting the value of the IMEI because we don't care about the value of the IMEI. We just want to know what the application is actually doing. So the application has a number of features. As I said, it has a non-disruptive TLS proxy. It also can detect PII leakages, which are obfuscated. And now we are also releasing a new version in which we can analyze all this application traffic, doing very advanced DPI in the order of 100 megabits per second. And we're not only maximizing the throughput, is that we are also minimizing the latency. So we are basically doing all this process by adding just 1 millisecond of additional latency. And as you can see here, how many of you have used a speed test? Is there anything missing here? Yeah, there are no ads. So basically now we are actually implementing and giving users the ability to actually block third-party advertising and tracking services of their choice. We're not actually giving them a list of what they should block. It has to be up to them. So armed with this tool and the data it produces, we basically have, for the paper that we will present at NDSS, we relied on the data provided by 12,000 users. And this has given us access to 40,000 apps. The number of application versions is actually greater than that. And in total, those 40,000 apps talk to 80,000 different domains. And we capture 12 million flows. You may wonder if this is actually a representative data set. Well, we think it is, because just the top 10,000 domains that we have in our data set explain 65% of the total traffic for a whole month in a mobile ISP in Europe with tens of millions of users. So I think that we are actually having a quite nice sample. And that also corroborates that we are not only looking at Android things, because those domains are also present on iOS devices. So to analyze this ecosystem, we cannot rely on existing datasets. So initially, we were trying to look for the low-hanging fruit. So we want to check Malwarebytes, HP Host, EasyList, and McAfee, and we realized that those are actually giving us a very incomplete picture of what's actually happening on the mobile ecosystem. So for instance, if you rely as well on URL classifiers like McAfee, you can see that they classify Flurry.com, which is a quite popular analytic service, as an internet service. But if you actually check for Akamai, which is a CDN, it will be also classified as an internet service. So you cannot actually rely on this data. So we implemented our own method to classify those domains. And here you can see the representation of 4 applications talking to 4 different domains, which are actually highlighted in blue. The first step was actually distinguishing between first-party and third-party domains. So here you can see that AccuWeather is actually reached by AccuWeather Android app, but also by the HTC Sans widget. So in that case, you can distinguish by analyzing the domains and the package names and also some other information that you can find on the paper, that we can distinguish when AccuWeather.com is acting as a first party or as a third party. The second thing was actually separating between ATS domains, so advertising and tracking services, from those domains that are not providing necessarily that service, like AccuWeather. They're a weather service, but they are collecting personal information from users. So they have the ability to collect personal data. So we classify those as ATS capable. And the third step is actually identifying the parent company. So for that, you can see, for instance, Crashlytics. It was initially a company, then it was acquired by Twitter, and then it was acquired by Google. So how do you know who is actually the parent company? Well, we rely on Crunchbase, because it has a lot of information about the startup ecosystem. So we did a lot of web crawl on that. So I will go quickly on the results. We had found in the order of 2,000 domains, and 730 that are ATS capable. And I'm talking about second-level domains. So it has food.accuweather.com, and meaning accuweather.com. And when you compare the coverage, you can see that only 38% of them are actually present on EasyList, and only 77% are present on HP hosts. Then we wanted to analyze the penetration of those domains by the number of applications that they have access to. So here you can see in red the ATS domains, and the first one is Google's indication, and the second one is the Facebook Graph API, which is a analytics and advertising service that Facebook is actually providing now to basically enable social network integration as well. But this is actually the second most popular tracker. Then we also wanted to analyze the market breakdown. And using the Crunchbase information, you can see that we found 292 parent organizations, and Alphabet, which is Google's, is the most dominant one. And it's actually present in 73% of all the applications. Then we also wanted to look at cross-device tracking. And here you can see that there are a few advertising and tracking services that are specific to Android, or mobile, sorry, like Crashlytics of Unity 3D, which is for game developers. But the majority of them have also the ability to track users across platforms. And we also wanted to look at data exports. So the only piece of personal information, which is not actually personal information, that we're collecting is a /24 of the public IP address. So it's basically because we wanted to attribute things to ISPs as well. So we wanted to know from which ISP the user is connecting. And we also have the ability to actually identify where is the geolocation of the server. So here you can see that most of the users, we have a lot of users coming from media for some funny reasons I will explain offline if you want. You can see that most of them are actually talking to servers in the US. And 40% of those domains, machines involved in tracking are actually hosted there. Then surprisingly, you can see that China has in the order of 2% of those machines. And the reason for that is Alibaba. So the problem is that when you're actually a user in a country with a strong regulation, you may actually connect to a country where the same standards of data protection and actually privacy policies are not actually the known whole. And finally, I'm still fine time-wise, I think. We also analyzed the privacy policies of those companies, and you can see that most of them are actually reporting publicly that they will be happy to sell the data with third-party companies. So that is actually an issue for data brokers. You can find more results here. We have another paper about how mobile applications use TLS. We found that those results are actually quite depressing. And the work is actually continuing after what we presented, and the thing is that we wanted to create an ecosystem in which basically the data is actually fueling research, and then the outcome of the research will actually become future features for the app. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Narseo. Warm applause. I think this is an example of a grant that exceeded the expectations by far. So thank you very much.